Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for coming out to this talk. Really excited to be here and to speak to you all. So, funny enough, the title of the talk has changed a little bit because originally when I put in a proposal to speak here, I was going to speak about the Aragon Network DAO, which was an old experimental DAO that Aragon had. And we've had a lot of interesting things come to light since then. And we've launched a new DAO. And had some RFV raiders come into our DAO, which was very interesting. And we had a lot of lessons learned from that. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about those today because I think they're going to be vastly more interesting, and you're going to learn a lot more from them. So, very brief history. Aragon ICO'd in 2017. It was the largest ICO at the time, 275,000 ETH. In 2018, we launched the first DAO framework ever. In 2021, actually, the founders had a bit of a fallout, and the teams actually sort of left. And the project sort of ended at that point, and there was a decision in 2021 to let's start experimenting with governance, let's try and build some teams back up, let's get this project back going. As you know, Aragon had a large treasury, still does, and really was monumental in kicking off DAO experimentation and DAO building. And so in 2021, we launched this experimental DAO. It was an optimistic governance DAO. We learned a lot from it, especially what we didn't really want to have, to be honest with you. And then 2022 is really when this new strategy we put out, this hyperstructure strategy came out. And these new teams formed together, none of which come from the original Aragon. And then in 2023, actually, just a few months ago at Denver, we launched the new protocol, a new front end, and a new DAO all at the same time. It was quite a monumental moment for all of us. So, I'm not going to go through all of this, but these are the two DAOs I'm going to briefly touch on today. We had an experimental DAO and the Aragon DAO itself. So, the Aragon Network DAO. This was sort of our first, let's say, start of experimenting with governance. It was an optimistic governance DAO. It had a 30-page charter. It was sort of more of a law is law DAO. A small percentage of people made this decision, and it was sort of a parallel experiment with actually the core teams building. And I remember clearly getting this 30-page document the day before this charter was supposed to enact and this DAO was supposed to launch, and was told, tomorrow you will be legally liable for this. You should probably read it. And everybody in the company was like, oh my God, I should probably read this charter. And so we did. And most of us probably didn't get through it. So we learned a lot from that. To be honest, the DAO was a great way to experiment. And it was a really popular sort of way at the time to try and bootstrap your community, bootstrap people working in your organization. But it ended up being a high cost with low returns. Misaligned contributors, I think I got up to 40 contributors at some point. I remember getting a message from our CMO who at the time said, I just received a strange email from somebody who said they're the head of marketing at Aragon. But I thought I was the head of marketing at Aragon. And so that's when we knew we had to take a look into what was happening in this DAO, and that's when we realized this wasn't going to work. The payments that went out to contributors, they ended up cashing out. There wasn't a meaningful distribution of hard power. And what ended up happening when you have a large charter and complex governance system built off soft power is people start to take advantage of that in the forum, the ones who understand how this charter works. And so, we wanted to double down on the fact Discord or forum does not equal DAO at Aragon. This is not what we think is a DAO. So let's get away from these social and ideological battles. Let's experiment with on-chain governance. Let's move away from this. So we launched the Aragon DAO later on. This was a delegate voting DAO. Had a one-page charter. It was just the on-chain rules of what is executable in a DAO. It was code as law. Token holders can override delegates at any time, which is really important. And it was no longer a parallel experiment. Full treasury transfer was going to happen, and it was going to happen in stages. That was really important. That was one of the safety mechanisms we put in place. We weren't going to just dump $200 million into a purely on-chain governance DAO without a good token distribution and without being prepared. So we started slowly moving funds over time. So here are the challenges which led to the incidence of this RFV raider attack, or whatever you want to call it, shortly after. So we were a mission-driven organization. Everybody who is here for a long time knows the Aragon Manifesto. This is a mission-driven organization, but it has a token. It has an extensive legacy legal structure dating back to 2017, which creates, obviously, complexity when you're trying to DAOify, can you imagine? Really horrible token distribution. ANT was owned by maybe 4 or 5 people. Everybody else was lost, dating back from 2017. How do you have these people stay engaged from 2017 to 2019 to 2023 when the project ended for a few months in between, right? So a lot of complexity starts to add up over the years. It had actually a utility token classification in Switzerland, and we have a lot of regulatory uncertainty, which meant that that treasury versus token market cap imbalance, which is why these raiders entered our system, which makes sense, was difficult to close. And there are many reasons why that is. And so finally you have nail in the coffin, misaligned, small, and centralized committee, with no power with the actual teams or the users. So this all leads to problems, as you can see. These are challenges that are going to be hard to overcome. So now we begin the Raiders of the Lost Ark, I like to call it. It's sort of funny, but basically one day, all of a sudden, 30, 40 different individuals started smashing into our Discord, using profanity, whatnot, and ended up requesting, obviously beginning to request what you could tell would be the liquidation potentially of the treasury of the association. So this is $200 million. And they have already successfully taken over Rook's DAO, Temple DAO, Rome DAO, and are breezing through different DAOs. Hector DAO now, and if you notice, Nouns is now forking. That's the same group. So super, super interesting what they work on. And to be frank, I'm not saying there's no validity to what they're doing. There actually is a lot of validity to what they're doing. And it's super interesting. And they're trying to, to create, end this book value difference, the RFV value between a token that is worth way less than its treasury. So there's some validity to this for sure. But I think some of the issues that arose were something like this. This is just a message that was sent. They will do what it takes to get what they want because there is millions and millions of dollars at stake. So that's posting addresses of contributors in forums. That's hiring private investigators to follow founders. So this is where I think most of us would agree, boundaries can be drawn regardless of what you believe in. So this is the huge question. What is owed to the mission, and what is owed to token holders? And I'm not saying I know the answer. Really, really challenging situation. As you can imagine, if there is a legal wrapper around your DAO, this to some degree ruins the autonomous aspect of your DAO. It may be required, it may not be required, right? But what does this lead to? The people on that association are required to follow the mission. They're mandated to do so. There's legal implications, there's tax implications if they don't. These are some of the things you have to give up when you have a legal wrapper. And so what is owed to the mission and what is owed to token holders? This is a really, 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 I think, question that people don't realize is super important until the day it's too late and they need to realize that it's that important. They need to figure it out. So I talk about some things that we learned of how not to get stuck in this situation. And so let's talk about them. So the first thing is how old do you think your DAO is going to, how long will it last? You hope it's going to last hundreds of years as an organization, right? And so you may need trusted mechanisms in your progression to decentralization, and that's totally okay. I mean, we all have to start somewhere, and we have to decentralize progressively. But there will probably be a moment, and it will come where your trusted actors are compelled to act for something. And this might actually be against token holder wishes. If your DAO is around long enough, this is almost inevitable. So one thing you have to start doing, you have to start protecting those trusted layers while still trying to hold them accountable. And this is really, really challenging. I mean, there's anonymous ways that we're working on using ZK snarks. There's obviously Polygon IDs creating digital identification, which creates anonymity. So there's ways that we can try and protect our trusted actors while also trying to keep them accountable because they need to be held accountable, of course. So something to think about because that day will come if your DAO is going to be 5, 6, 7, 10, 100 years old where you're going to need to face that. So Aragon actually, as you know, in an ICO, really did that for crowdfunding. And this is about token distribution and ownership. And that's super, super, super important. And what I want to talk about is an important word, which is resilience. So there are many reasons why you want to distribute your token and your ownership. But I want to talk about resilience here, because this is what Aragon focused on in its ICO. And the biggest mistake we made is we didn't continue to work on these things throughout its existence. And you always need to iterate on this. You can't just do an airdrop and then you think 6 years down the line your DAO is going to be exactly the same. Not many DAOs are that old, but we can tell you it's not going to be, right? So one of the best ways to sustainably create resiliency of an on-chain organization is through incentive alignment. So my friends at Lido, we're very, very close with Lido. See some of us in the crowd. And I think this is a great example, and this is what DAOs need to be working to add as a mechanism in how they create resiliency. So Lido uses Aragon for its governance, our protocol, our framework, and we stake a considerable amount of our ETH with Lido. So we have incentives here. They need us to succeed, and we need them to protect our money, and actually what we create for them helps us protect our own money. And so by doing potential token swaps with organizations with this kind of incentive or ecosystem alignment, we then have added another layer where we are participating in each other's governance. And so now, if Aragon owned tokens of Lido or Lido owned tokens of Aragon, we could participate in each other's governance for each other's benefit and for thus our own benefit. So trying to find these types of situations with your protocols or products is a really great way to create circular incentive alignment and get tokens in the right hands of people who are building using your products, using your protocol, and thus are going to benefit off of it. So you can protect each other, basically. So who? You want to do these with those that rely on you for their success. Users, integrators, service providers. These are people you definitely want to have your tokens when you're talking about resiliency. When? The best time to achieve this is when you have product market fit. And that's, I know, really challenging to come by these days. But you need to create mechanisms to increase this token incentive alignment over time. It's not about just a launch. You can't just launch a token, airdrop your token, and think in 5, 6 years, which, 7 years, which is how old Aragon actually is that it's going to be, your DAO is going to be the same, or your token distribution is going to be the same. So you need to keep working on that. And then how, this is a really big question today. I know a really popular methodology, like Diva just launched their token, which is like non-transferable airdrops as a way to start. People aren't dumping your tokens right off the bat. This is just one idea. So at the end of the day, I think if you're building a resilient DAO, one that you want to last for dozens of years or longer, you really need to be able to adapt. Adaptation is key. As I've mentioned over and over, like not many DAOs are very old. And the ones that are, the ones who are being successful are the ones that are able to adapt. So some methodologies. Obviously, we need to start simple, start safe, and evolve over time. Build allowing for flexibility to change over time. This is really, really important. Like you don't want to put your quorum rate too high, for example, and then not being able to adjust that after. So start and adjust over time. Constantly make adjustments. Like as adjustments are coming, just like building a product. As adjustments are coming in, you're getting validation, information, you're getting validation, keep adjusting. These things don't have to be set in stone. Build transparently. It goes without saying that if people understand that you're a mission-driven organization, this is going to help in them understanding that that's where they need to vote, or that's where the power may lie. And then finally, using modular tools. This is exactly why we actually have built an entirely new protocol. Like the old Aragon OS has over $15 billion in TVL that's governed by those contracts. Yet we're still pushing for a new protocol, which is going to be highly modular, adaptable, and is what's going to allow DAOs to actually change and be able to do what we're saying right now over time, rather than launching your DAO and starting being stuck in it and not being able to adjust. So super, super, super important. Adaptation equals resilience. So that's it. Thank you so much. Let's keep building resilient DAOs, and let's build better together. How much time?
There's 1 minute.
2 minutes?
1 minute.
There's 1 minute if anybody has one question. Be happy to take one question. Otherwise, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.